business. And it's not often that you get to introduce someone who is honestly one of the legends in the entertainment world and one of my very, very best friends. John and I met over the phone, I believe it was 1974, when he was a senior in high school, and because he couldn't get a date to the prom, he wanted to get the band, so he called me. I booked a band with him. Then a couple of years later, he went to Davidson College, was active in the student union, booking bands with our friend C. Shaw Smith, and I continued our relationship. When he got out of college, just like so many people that I knew, John talked about wanting to get in the entertainment business. We talked a little bit, and I gave him advice, and the next thing I know, he moves on to working with Paragon, I believe was the first thing in probably, let's see, that was I guess 1978. And of course, Paragon represented Charlie Daniels and Allman Brothers. And then John moved to New York to work for a company called Frontier Booking International, FBI, with the great Ian Copeland, who was a legend in the show business. And I'll never forget, John called me when he went to New York and tell me about a new band that he found, and some guy named Sting and the Police. So this man was responsible for the beginning of that great career, along with, I think, the Go-Go's, Joan Jett, so many others. Then, as I remember, I think you moved and got into, at that point, let me check my notes to make sure I have the chronology right. He went to maybe L.A. and had a Christian agency where he booked his friend Michael Smith, Amy Grant, won multiple awards, sold that company to ICM. After that, his journey took him back to Nashville, and I really mean this, everybody sitting here. With two people, John opened CAA in Nashville, and of course now they are the preeminent agency in the world, over 100 employees, and John helped represent and secure people like Zac Brown, Faith Hill, so many other artists for CAA. John has won so many awards in his lifetime, a Grammy for an album he produced. He's been Agent of the Year multiple times. Almost everything music in Nashville John has touched. I do also want to mention something to me that's equally important, maybe more important. John has given back in his career to multiple organizations and served on boards in Nashville that represent almost everything philanthropy. He has a great foundation on site. He has a golf tournament coming up in a couple of weeks. I've been lucky enough to play in that. And outside of all that, John, more importantly, is a great, great family man. He is loyal to his friends. Our friendship goes back, we talked about in the car, since 1974. And as big and as noteworthy as John is in the entertainment business, he never forgets his friends. He's a great family man. His wife, Dawn, is wonderful, too. Beautiful grandchildren by his son, Jason. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present one of my best friends. It's an honor to introduce John Huie. Thank you.
All right. And I just want to make a quick note. If you guys are having great conversations in the back there, if you wouldn't mind just taking it to the coffee shop around the corner, appreciate that so much, y'all. So, John, just to get started, what a legend. The last time I actually saw you, I don't know if you knew I was there, but I was at the CMA Touring Awards. You won the Lifetime Achievement Award. So this is an honor for me to be able to have a conversation with you in front of everybody. And so just want to get started at the beginning. We know all the things you've gotten into. We're going to get into it. But how did you first fall in love with the business, and what brought you into it?
Well, they sent me a list of questions they were thinking I'd ask, and I said I could spend the whole hour on the first question because I spoke at a school 2 weeks ago, New Mexico State, and it was a 2-hour class, and that's what I talked about, was just my history. But I was talking to college kids, and I know we got a more diverse group here that covers the range, and so hopefully we'll bounce things around. But I mean, music was always my number one love. I was a Beatle fanatic when I was a little kid, 7, 8 years old. I went to see the movie Hard Day's Night. And I didn't have any desire to be a Beatle. I want to be one of the guys running with the Beatles. I want to be carrying the bags or suitcases or doing all that stuff. And like Larry said, in high school, I booked the prom dances for 2 years. I went to Davidson to play football and to get a phenomenal education. But first thing I did when they had a union fair, I joined the concert committee. And I quit football after 2 years and became concert chairman for 2 years, because I knew I wanted to be in the music business. And I focused on that. So my college degree says sociology major, but I would say I really majored in student union. In fact, as Cesar Smith was an idol of mine. He was the director of student activities, and really I call it like a second father to help me learn about the business. And I just relied on his knowledge. In fact, when I started the Cesar Smith Board after leaving from Davidson. Am I checking in and out of here? Okay. And I said, it's an award going to the most active union person voted by the union board. And I said, there's one qualifier. And they said, what's that? It can have zero to do with academics. I don't want to have anything to do with grades. And they first said no. I said, okay, I won't do it then. Because I graduated with a 2.8. So I was not cum laude or walking down. I wasn't the guy with the whatever it is you get when you do that. So I knew I was dedicated. I also was I won't give you my story on why I was such a bad typer, but I knew I wanted to be in the business. I bought a lot of acts from this company, Paragon, and I put a proposal together to start a college department for them. And instead of going to one of the big major agencies and have to start in a mail room, and then you become an assistant on the desk, and which is back, I know we don't use this word anymore, but you're basically a secretary. And I knew I would fail miserably at that. So I put a plan together starting, and I graduated. Alex Hodges, I met with Alex Hodges, who was the president of Paragon. He just got installed in the Hall of Fame of IEBA Tuesday night in Nashville. And he's been working for Nylander organizations the last 20 years, and we still very close and stay in touch. And I put a proposal to do it. He loved my proposal. He says, you got a job. So he said, when do you graduate? I said, May 28th. He looked and saw it was a Sunday. He said, the 29th. I said, well, first of all, that's Memorial Day. I don't think anybody will be here. And second of all, I've been going to school for 16 years. I really wanted to backpack around Europe. I want to take like 6 months off. And then I said, like a little vacation. He said, be here June 12th. So June 12th, I said, yes, sir. And I showed up June 12th and started my career, and it was until the Olympics hit Atlanta. I think it was 91 or something. I never had 2 weeks off in a row. Subsequently, I just love doing what I do. I always say, if you find something you love to do, do it, and you never have to go to work. So that was the start of career. One thing at Davidson College, you're going to hear Burt Downs at 2 o'clock. He was my partner in running the concert division, and he and I were close, and we still remain close. And now he's the manager of REM after all these years. So I get a phone call from him when I started at Paragon. He was at law school, and he's the moaning and groaning. He can be that kind of guy sometimes. And he was, you get to do what you want. I said, well, you're in law school. You'll run across a band or something. Just do that. And then sure enough, while he's at Georgia Law School, he meets REM. Now, we're in Macon, Georgia, and Bill Berry, the drummer of REM, was the office boy at the Paragon HC at the time. And he said, hey, and he went to college after high school, and he said, you got to come see our band. And we went to see REM at the 688 Club in Atlanta, and the first time there was, I think, probably 50 people there. And the second time, I think there was 300 people there. So we quickly created a relationship and signed the band while they were still students. So it's just amazing how things grow and mature and hopefully successful. And I would say that was one that was very, very, very successful. And you'll hear from Bert later this afternoon. So then from there...
what was that job?
Oh, okay.
So, hey, I'm just kidding.
I was waiting for you.
What was that job, that first job? What were the actual tasks that you were doing right out of college?
Well, it was to start a college department, so it was up for me to determine. He said, you got the job. Well, I determined what the job was. And basically, a booking agent, pretty simple. Find work. Find work for these musicians. And, act comes in, makes $1,000. We make 100. They makes 10,000. We make 10%. So it's pretty simple. But I'm supposedly starting a college department. So I sat down at my desk. I shared an assistant, believe it, right out of school. All right, now what do? I got up, left, went to a bookstore, bought a Barron's College Guide, and just started calling from Alabama all the way down to Wyoming, all the universities, who's in charge of music, and just created my own Rolodex. That's how I got started. Then most colleges buy their talent through middlemen. And then you got to find out who the middlemen are in the country and what schools they represent. So is building a Rolodex, which I know that word probably strange to a lot of you, but that's the thing we flipped, and we have a card from each school with all the data on it. But that's what I did, and I just started booking bands and put them off the roster. And then gradually you get accustomed to knowing talent, and then you want your own client base. I really wasn't responsible for signing talent because I was right out of school, but I found this little kind of country rock band called Buckacre out of Central Illinois, and that was really the first band I was responsible for. And from there it grew. And then Ian Copeland, brother Stuart Copeland, the drummer of the Police, was an agent in Macon. You ask how the guy from Macon, he came from London. He wore blue jeans and T-shirts every day of the year. He did not want to wear a suit. And if you worked in L.A. and New York, you wear a suit. And if you were in L.A. and New York, you didn't smoke pot at lunch. And that was probably a prerequisite for Ian getting his day's work done. He loved Macon, we were colonial home. He could sit on the porch. It was just an easy way of life, but we had major talent. And he came from England. His brother started his band, the Police, and Miles Copeland started IRS Records. And all of a sudden we had a label, and they signed Squeeze, the Go-Go's, just all of a sudden had a huge roster of acts. And so we had this Southern rock list, and we had this punk list. And then Ian decided he moved to New York, asked me to go with him. I went with him, and it just kind of grew from there. I think 3 years into it, we had 1, 2, and 3 on the charts with the Go-Go's, Joan Jett, and the Police. And we were a staff of 8 people. So we were on fire, and we had more fun than a barrel of monkeys. It was a blast. It was a blast. And it's a more complicated story of how I got in Christian music, but it was that's another hour, so I just won't say it. But I got involved, signed Amy Grant when she was rocketing ship up to arena level, and when you have number one in a town, you attract the other. So once I had Amy, then Michael Smith wanted me to represent him, then Petra wanted to represent him. I signed DC Talk, signed Stephen Curtis Chapman, so all the Christian acts. So then I had a punk list. It had all the variety of music, as you could say. Oh, and I was the chief guy in charge of reggae at FBI. So I represented Peter Tosh, Third World, Steel Pulse, Reggae Sunsplash, Black Uhuru. And so I had my fingers in a little bit of everything. So, but once I got the Christian, I became quickly the #1 Christian agent in the country, and I kind of decided to leave and start my own company. And I did, and it was successful. ICM, by process, saw what I did, was impressed, bought my company, moved me to LA, where that was a kind of a, quiet point. I didn't like being in Los Angeles, and I wasn't very fond of ICM. So, and then country started exploding, and then ICM wanted me to move, after 5 years, say, you want to move to Nashville? Yes. But CAA beat them to the punch to pull me away from there to move and to start an office in 1991 with a guy named Ron Beard. And they said, because in country, if you wanted to be successful, you had to have presence in Nashville. You couldn't do it outside of that. So what they said, the class of '89 was Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, Clint Black, I think Vince Gill. Was a huge slew of acts came, and we. So I came, and Ron and I started a company. So it was only going to be 4 people in the company, and we started in Ron Baird's second bedroom. And we eventually got an office. A guy named Rod Essick joined us a year later, who became a hugely successful agent too. And then it said in my bio we have 80. We actually have 140. And then we got into sports, and now we're now the headquarters of CAA Sports is in Nashville, Tennessee. So we're over 140 employees in Nashville right now.
That's incredible. And I want to just take it back to, you're basically helping to start up this first booking agency. You create your own. I was speaking with some artists yesterday, and I said, hey, something that does help is if you create a separate email, a separate name, you're booking yourself as this booking agent that is you, different name, Do you have any suggestions for these independent artists before they get
Well, the first country client that I signed, it was interesting because when I actually was at ICM in Los Angeles, I represented Dolly Parton, and I was handed Dolly Parton and handed Dwight Yoakam. And from a touring side, then I got no complaints, but from a movie side, they left and went to CAA. So when I left ICM to go to CAA, I again then inherited those two clients back. Did Dwight Yoakam for another 8 years, 10 years there, then he left, and then I signed him again 10 years ago. So I've had two, I booked in his career at the beginning, and now I've still got him. But the first client I actually signed when I was in Nashville was Susie Boggess. And Susie Boggess, singer-songwriter, phenomenal artist, but she had an alias name, and she booked herself. And she, hey, my name, I forget what it was, Jane Doe. Hi, I've got this phenomenal singer named Susie Boggess, and I want to play your club. And that was her whole spiel. And, it was really impressive on how she got it done. She was not going to be denied or wait till someone called her. She went out and did it. I also signed, skipping up till 4 years ago, I was watching one of the guilty pleasures I do with my wife is hardly anybody in the frickin' business watches all the Voice, all the different shows. My wife and I have a guilty pleasure. We watch them. America's Got Talent. We watch them all together. And 4 years ago, I'm watching and I see a girl named Tom, which is a gorgeous brother-sister combo. It's two brothers and a sister. They're beautiful. I don't know if you know them. And they sang like angels. And they were huge, the biggest landslide victory ever in that show. And to date, no one's broken off that show. American Idol, you've had a lot of acts breaking off American Idol, but no one's broken off The Voice. Voice is primary more about the judges than they are about the talent and the escapades they run against each other. But I really felt something about it. I said, Scripture says, let your light so shine before men they see God. I said, you do it. You don't tell people your light's on. You just glow. You got joy written all over your face. So I actually tracked them down and said, hey, I want to work with you guys. And they were blown away. And they said, why? I said, well, the week of the finals, they had 4 songs in the top 10 on iTunes. I mean, Billie Eilish had 1. They had 4. I don't think that's ever happened. They were like, oh, we haven't won yet. You're winning this. And the kids are Mennonite, they're Mennonite families. So I started making some research of where the strongholds of Mennonite population. Lancaster is a big, strong, Central PA. Goes Central PA to Indiana up to Wisconsin. There are strongholds there. And there's their American Theater, 1,600 seats. And I had called and like I said, let's shoot for May or something, like give a little distance in between. And this was in October. And I asked Caleb, the oldest brother, I just said, what's your first goal when you win this? And they said, to make a great album. I said, wrong answer. I said, what's the right answer? I said, get your butt on the road as quick as you can, because you're playing in front of a lot of people. You want to close those relationships. And they said, oh, okay. Well, to date, they haven't had a successful record out. So 4 years later, they'd be still scrambling on how to get music out, But we put a show. They won on a Tuesday. We put the show on sale Friday, sold out in 45 minutes. We added a second show. It sold out, did 3,200 people in that. And then I said, okay, so I can go around now. Hey, the American Theater in Lancaster? Yeah, this band sold two shows out. I just want to play Gramercy Theater in New York. That's 500 cap. If I can sell 3,200 seats in Lancaster, PA, sure I can do 500 people in New York City. So that's how we built a tour. We picked the strongholds and went to the strongholds, booked, hugely successful, walked out of $52,000 we made in Lancaster, made $3,000 in New York City, but played the right showcase rooms. It was a brilliant strategy. They did $1.9 million their first year. No successful music follow-up. Did like half that the second year. No, they did 1.2 the second year. Third year, I think we did like 850,000, and we're in the 4th year. And I just said, I said, what attracted me too was they toured as a family band in a van, calling up friends, can we sleep on your couch and do a house party? And so they knew what it meant to work. And I just said, all right, that too is important, not only to how good you look and how well you sing. It's for some reason, I can't for the life of me know how come they can't break through. And there's some superstar acts that we represent. I don't see how in the heck they have broken through. You know, the marketplace is the marketplace, and that's what you gotta go with, and hope you get on the right horse. And
so when you're looking for, so what you saw the light, you saw the talent, but you saw the stats to back it up. So what are you as a booking agency, especially CAA, looking for to actually, you know, sign new artists?
Well, that's where I kind of differ, where I'm glad I'm in the fourth quarter of my career, is because it's all data driven now. And when I signed Zac Brown Band, I was representing Chris Tomlin, and he had a sold out show in the Fox Theater in Atlanta, and I'd rented a bus and was taking a bunch of people down to go to that show. And I had a buddy of mine say, hey, man, you really need to check this guy out. I said, who? Zac Brown. I said, well, who's he? Well, he plays these clubs. I mean, you know, I'm kind of past that. And he goes, well, you really need to check him out. And he plays a different, like Zac would play one club on Tuesday night, a different club in Atlanta on Wednesday night, a different club on Thursday, a different club on Friday, a different club on Saturday, and just rotated those clubs. And it had a very consistent thing going. So I said, well, I'll try to get there. And he actually called me on my cell phone at, I think it was 10 o'clock or something. The show at the Fox was just getting over. He said, hey, your Fox show over? Yeah, you need to start. He's at the Dixie Tavern in Marietta. He just went on. You get up there, you'll catch the latter part of his set. So I said, okay, as a favor to you, I'll stop and go see this act. So we get the bus. I talked to all the guys on the bus. Look, I got to stop and see this band. They were all groaning. Oh, man, we want to get home. So we're just going to stop. We'll spend 15 minutes, see a couple songs, get back on the bus, and get back to Nashville. Well, we show up at the gig, car lot's packed. Walk in the door, you can't move. There's door-to-door people. I went, whoa, we got something here, you know. When I heard chicken fried, and he said, let's raise a beer for a toast, and I see 400 Budweiser bottles go up there, I said, close the door. We ain't leaving. So I went afterwards, introduced myself to him, and just said, hey, we need to talk. And I said, you guys are going to play stadiums one day. And I really felt convicted on that. And we closed the deal, and we booked a show in Nashville. It's like he didn't have a lot of free-flowing cash. We're a service business. We don't own anything. So we're not a label or a publishing company that you can advance money and you own property of it. Zac owns all his own. He owns his own label. He owns his own masters from day one. So he was like, how do you get me to Nashville so I don't lose my shirt? Well, my neighbor is a YPO, Young Professionals Organization. She was throwing a party. And she goes, man, I need some sort of music. I said, I got just the band for you. So if you give me $3,500, I'll bring a band that's going to be in a stadium one day. She goes, okay. So he goes over there. We booked the date, and then I booked another club for $500 as an industry showcase. So that's how we got him to Nashville first. And it's a bragging right. My neighbor is still my neighbor, still one of my dearest friends, and she tells everybody she sees how she had Zac Brown play in her backyard. So it creates that. But you see something you love, you follow through it, and that's where I like gut. I like my gut instincts. I'm right a lot, and I'm wrong a lot. But you go with gut. And now I've got a whole slew of young guys that all they do is peruse data. And labels are like that now. There's really no A&R at labels anymore. You artists out there, how many of you guys are artists? You're the A&R. You are A&R. If you're looking for someone to decide your fate, look in a mirror, because no one cares until you prove that you create something. And that's the great democratization of the music business. Everybody's got a chance. You're not waiting for that A&R guy from the label to come sign you. You know, it used to be that as an agent, when I got in the country, it was like, hey, Sony, what are you signing? Warner Brothers, what are you signing? You know, and now they're coming asking who we're signing. Who are we investing our time and energy in? So there really is no one answer, but it's just about revenue. Nico Moon's one of our clients. I don't know if anybody knows Nico, but he was, he was signed to Sony, had a #1 record on Sony, and they were not putting his second single out. And he said, why? He said, well, you've got to get enough streaming action before we're going to get behind another single. He says, you just made a #1. A #1 single in country music usually generates $1 million of income. I mean, it's very, very lucrative. So he just said, if you're not going to put another single, I want you to drop me. Now, how many guys who've had a #1 single going to your label, Sony Records, say, I want you to drop me? And they did. And now Nico's managing his own catalog. It's kind of like Chance the Rapper, wins Artist of the Year, Album of the Year. He put his own music out. So until it's tough for people to they want to get on an engine that's going in the right direction. And it's like we're a boost. An agency is a boost. A great manager is a boost. A label can be a boost. Nate Smith's the client we don't have. We did for a second, but we didn't. He was making $20,000 a month off streaming. He decided for himself, he made the choice to sign to Sony and figured to get to that next level, is that 20 going to, how do I get to turn that 20 to 50 a month? How does that 20 in net income? Could live long and nice life, probably keep doing this, but if I'm going to be a superstar and make $100, $200, $300, $400, $500,000 a night, I mean, Megan Moroney did the stadium tour at Kenny Chesney in the 3rd position, was making $50,000 a show. Now she's getting $500 to $1 million a show. So it can flip on a dime off success, because all of a sudden, if you're an artist that people want to see, everybody will come, and then an act that people used to want to see is going to have a struggle to keep at that level.
So what if an artist here, does the thing, and is what everyone is striving to do, which is get that one song that's viral on TikTok and on Instagram, and it's having its moment. They're able to play more shows. How do you keep momentum for an artist like that?
Do it again and again and again. There's no. I always say, when I tell new acts, I say, first of all, you need me a lot more than I need you. I said, my job is to make it so I need you more than you need me. And it takes a team. I mean, there's a blurring of the lines on a lot of different roles, with the advent of Live Nation and AEG and a lot of the big promoters. There is a role for a manager. I mean, it was kind of like managers are really like the hub of the wheel next to the artist, but there's the publisher and the record label and PR and agency all play a role. Sometimes there's some managers can play an agent's role better than, but there's some agents that can play a manager role better than some managers. But all those positions or activities need to be taken care of and nurtured. And the key is how, when you put that team together, it's going to be on successful activity. And then people are all watching on who does what. If all of a sudden CAA gets involved with an artist and that doesn't have a deal, all the labels want to know. They're all paying attention. So, and if you wait, I mean, sometimes it gets tough, because if you pull the trigger too soon, you're burdened. We really feel obligation when we represent someone. We want to represent them well. And we had Keith, and we still represent Keith Urban, 8 years before he had a hit single. 8 years. So, and he's everyone knows what a great musician Keith is. But Keith was so adaptable. It'd be like, I had a Dwight Yoakam 3 shows at the Ryman. Hey, Keith, you want to open up those? He said, there's only $500 for an opening act. Well, can I do it solo? Yes, you can do it solo. Great, I'll do that. Hey, Keith, we got a fair here up in Paducah, Kentucky. It's $5,000. Great, I can take a band. He would make it work, but it wasn't on us to make it work. It wasn't on his manner. He knew he was obligated to make it work. So I just think, as an artist, you are the key to your success. Oh, back to the Nico Moon thing. That he was upset because I think it was 6 million in streams before. I don't know if that was weekly. I don't know, but it was. I remember 6 million, and he thought that was ridiculous. And that's why he asked off Sony. Now he sees, as he's in charge of his own purse and he's dividing on when to go out, he's not investing his money into promoting on radio till he gets 6 million streams. I mean, Sony was right, but it took him to pull off and be responsible of his own pocketbook before he knew he was going to take that investment and that chance.
What is the benefit to joining a label like the Nate Smith or like Nico leaving? What's the benefit of staying or being with them?
Well, if you have a good partner, it's to invest. I mean, promote a country record is $500,000 to $1 million. So if you're Nate Smith and getting 20 grand, are you going to spend $500,000? No, you're not. And you have the independent promoters talking around, and you raise your profile. But it is a question. Zac Brown, new record. When one of the questions y'all have talked about was about indie artists and the mental health. I'd say, well, first of all, when you hear indie artists, you always first think of, indie. You don't have a lot, you know what I mean? But like I said, Chance the Rapper, independent artist. Zac Brown makes 30, 40 million bucks a year. He's now an independent artist. He decided that he's had so many failed attempts. He's been on so many labels. He's moved around because he had control of his content. His first label, venture into recorded music, was a joint venture that Live Nation at one point was going to do. They were going to start their own label. And they had signed U2, they signed Madonna, and they wanted to break a band, and they signed Zac Brown. And that was before Rapino was in charge. Michael Cole and Rapino were both kind of the co-heads. And there was, I don't want to say a power struggle, but there was whatever you want to call it. Michael Cole lost, Rapino became in charge, and Rapino says, we're not going to be in the music business. And after they spent about $500,000 or $800,000, whatever, they were doing a 2-record deal over 2 records for Zac over 3 years. They're going to give him $1 million a year for the current record that he recorded, a second record, and tour support. And they were basically partners. And the record was, so they get the single, it was top 40 already when they decided that they weren't going to be in the record business. So they basically turned around and handed the record back to Zac and says, hey, we're not going to do this. Now, he lost I think they ended up giving close to $1 million for the first record, but he didn't get the $2 million, but he made more than that because he owned everything, and he did it totally on his terms. The more control you have, they're going to make a label going to make any kind of deal where they're going to own that, they're going to piece of your touring, and a piece of the whole 360 deal. We all know those terms. Well, if you're a successful act, or you're an act that deal has come up and you're trying to renegotiate your deal, which every act wants to do, you're in control, and it's more of they're going to get a 10% ride over on the deal. It's a whole different animal. But that's changed too. I mean, when Kenny Chesney's deal ran out at Sony, they were trying to re-sign him, and the first thing a manager is going to ask for, and Burtis is here, is going to say, we want reversion of our masters. We want to own our back catalog. Well, certain labels are going, in this day of streaming, I think I got the best. The reason you're a major superstar is you've sold 10 million records already. We own that. Good luck at your next label. We're going to keep the catalog. So a lot of people now are letting, Kenny Chesney's now on Warner Brothers. They hop labels, Carrie Underwood jump labels. So you'll see a lot of moving around, but it's all crunching numbers and, hey, where do you think you can make money?
So when an indie artist, they're here, people don't really know them, they don't feel important when they walk in a room, and they're definitely not treated with the same level of respect when they make it. And now they're a millionaire, and now people want something from them, but they're still the same person. So they have to kind of grapple with that.
We talked about, I always said, I think every human being needs therapy. I'm not saying that as a joke.
Truth.
Everyone needs therapy because we're all a little bit fucked up. Just some people are more fucked up than others. Artist, now did you think about it? You're an artist that no one knows who you are. You got this talent. You can't believe your songs haven't made it through. You have a hard time making a living. No one cares. And all of a sudden you strike something and it works. And all of a sudden you got some action. Shabuzi we represent. We've had him as a rapper signed out of Los Angeles for 8 years. He moves to Nashville, becomes a hillbilly, and now he's a multimillionaire. Jelly Roll, we represented Jelly Roll. The guy was a convict in prison, multi-millionaire. And if you don't have the right therapy and right counsel, you think all of a sudden no one cares, now everybody cares. I was poor, now I'm filthy rich. So how do you manage that transition, which happens in a really short period of time? Mm-hmm. You really got to have good counsel and be surrounded by good people that you trust, that just not really trying to get something off of you, but somebody that can give you as much as you're giving them. So,
So talk about, everyone needs therapy in some way. Can you talk a little bit more about On-Site Foundation and your work with them? You're a member of the board.
Well, there's a organization called On-Site in Nashville, and I call it the Betty Ford of mental health. And it's a campus. There's actually a small campus now in California, but they do seminar, and it's very artist-centric. I mean, I lost a son 11 years ago, and it saved our family's life. My wife spent a month out there. I spent a couple weeks. But it really has great therapy, and just their whole pattern, and there's a lot of industry functions that go out there. We started 10 years ago a retreat for parents who've lost kids. The whole out of order, when you lose a child, it's nothing worse. And it's what my golf tournament benefits and pays for a retreat for 50 parents. And this will be our 10th year. And every year we're full, and we have to say no. But that's a very artist-centric. They have a campus, but they also have offices. The campus is about an hour and a half outside of Nashville. In Nashville, there's offices, and they have artist retreats, and they have a Monday night for, I would say it's an extended AA meeting, but it's people who are in recovery and people who can lean in on each other, and it's you have to be an artist. I could not go, but it's artist talking to artist, and there's a real strong bond there. But I do believe in your journey. Doesn't matter what you're worth or how much money you have. If you're not healthy, both physically and mentally, who can? What's the point?
Right. You were telling me on the phone yesterday talking about Kelsey Ballerini, who just rocket launched up, and can get to be a lot. When you're finally making it, you don't want to say no to any opportunities. When can you start saying no for your health, and how do you go about that?
Well, again, about surrounding yourself with wise counsel. My job as an agent is to find work for people. It's not to turn work down. So if someone asks what your opinion is, maybe you need to take a break. But first of all, every artist is a snowflake. Every human is a snowflake. We're all different. And we all have things that work and certain things that don't work. There's some acts that want to go on a road, work every day of the week, and there's some acts that can't sing 2 days in a row. They'll have to alternate days. So I just think you got to find your line. And when you're a rocket ship, Kelsey Ballerini, I first met her when she was 15 years old at an ASCAP singer-songwriter thing, and I met her. And she had dibs. She had songs at 15 she'd written that were on her first album. And I know her first album is still my favorite album. I think every record she's done has been great, but she had 5 number ones on her first album. I mean, it's a phenomenal record. But I heard the song, and I said, and I saw her, and I gave her a big old hug and swung her around, and I said, "You're going to be a major superstar one day." And I put her down, and then I didn't talk to her till another 5 years. And then when she actually got a record deal, and then when I met her, she goes, "I want to be with you. You told me 5 years ago I was going to be a superstar." It's like, wow, that one moment. Oh, go back to Zac Brown. When we played our first stadium show was Fenway Park in Boston. We sold out, and after the show, we were doing a champagne toast, and John Hopkins said, "Hey, I need to toast some person that said 3 years ago we were going to be playing stadiums." I thought he was nuts. He said, "I just want to get out of bars." That was his ambition, just to get out of bars. And I'm thinking, who's he talking about? And he said, I want to toast our agent, John Huie. So that was a kind of meaningful thing. So you never know what you can say that sticks, especially with new acts. I mean, life's pivotal. And I always tell also new acts too, is that enjoy the journey. It's the hope of the future. It's the hope. And that's not only just musicians, even if you guys are starting new businesses, like what you're doing, you have hope of being successful. You know, you're making ends meet, but your hope is to buy a bigger house or a bigger car or start a family or whatever. You have hope. So when you get to the top, that's when neurosis kicks in, you know, because you want to stay on top. And you know there's always someone at your heels. So how to deal with that? I mean, it's, you know, I turned 70 in March. You know, I'm starting, you know, how do I gracefully, and I 4 years ago, CAA, Rod Essick and I have been running that company for years. Our Ron Baird, our first partner, passed away of Parkinson's 10 years ago. But they said, hey, you know, this company's too defined by you two guys. We need to raise up other leaders. Will you pass the baton? I said, are you firing us? That's the last thing we're doing. We just want you to get in the background a little bit more, you know. So I thought I was getting fired when I won Lifetime Achievement Award. That's something, when you're still working, isn't that what you give when people retire? You give them something for like the gold watch, you know. So I got that. I was like, am I okay? Do I still have a job? That neurosis still kicks in. So
how did CAA stay in that power and just continue growing with all the other competitors around? Like, you know, what kind of values in your leadership do you and Rod bring to CAA that you hope continues?
Well, the fact we had it 5 years ago, we've seen it somewhat transition to a little different company. And it is not exactly, you know, certain things I go, gosh, I wish I had done that. I should have done that. And other things going, I wish they hadn't have done that. I wish they wouldn't do that. But there's, you know, it's like having a child and you know, let them go off to school, you know, they graduate high school, go to college, and, you know, I wish he wouldn't do that. Well, you got to learn your own life. You got to build your own life. And, you know, it's no longer, I'm not in charge anymore. You know, the cord's cut, but I'm still there. You know, I get a call and say, hey, in the middle of a work day, come talk to you guys. I don't ask permission. I just book my ticket and I show up. So it's about mentoring. I always say, you know, that I you know, gosh, is there another mountain peak? It'd be great. But I think I've seen the, you know, the top of my mountain peak. I want to help other people get to the top of theirs. That would be the legacy, to know that, you know, I helped other people be successful in what they're trying to do.
To close out here, last question here. What major trends are you seeing that's going to shape the next decade of live music, of music? And any words of wisdom to the artists here?
I knew that was on that list, and that's why when someone say, how do you keep up with the latest this, that, and the other? I keep up by hiring young people, you know. We have a couple of whiz kids that are just, it's all about data. I'll give you one story. I'm involved in this club that's out in California, and I was hosting in the Redwoods. I was hosting a songwriter, a Bluebird show, and I had John from Zac Brown Band's in the Bluebird setup in the songwriter show, and he asked me who else was in the group. I told him who else was on the stage, and he said, "Well, no, Chris." I went, "Chris who?" "Chris Belbuda." And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know who Chris was. But I didn't want to act like I didn't know who he was. So I'm Googling him, and he's a songwriter that's written for Sabrina Carpenter, John Legend. He's a pop writer, but he lives in Nashville. And I said, well, it turns out that he was co-writing a lot of Zac Brown's new album. So I said, he said he was coming to the Grove. He was coming to this function I'm at, but he was coming a day later. And I said, well, give me his number. I'll call him. Because we had mainly country writers, and this club really wanted to see some other things. So I called him and said, hey, can you come a day early and be on the songwriter thing? He said, sure. So he goes, and he sits on the stage, and he's a phenomenal guitar player. He starts singing. He sounded like Zac. He was a great bluesy voice. And usually most songwriters that are just songwriters, they're just songwriters because they can't sing. They're not entertainers, you know. This guy blew my mind. I said, dude, where you been? He said, what do you mean? I said, did you try to make it as an artist? Well, kind of. I said, well, you're pretty damn good. It was back to my gut. I felt a gut. I said, you know, I didn't say, hey, let me see your streaming numbers. You know, let me see how many friends do you have? I just said, hey, I like your voice. You obviously write for a lot of great people. He's written a lot of songs and a lot of songs on records, but hadn't had a lot of big hits. And I said, do you have your own stuff? He said, yeah. And I said, well, send it to me if you want to, but if not, but if you ever want to go to lunch, call me, let's go to lunch. So he calls me, and we said, go to lunch, and he said, well, I'm working on this project. And I said, what is it? He's called Cowboy Candy. I said, yeah. I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, it's all my buddies that are all members of other bands that don't tour. It's like one guy, the drummer of Humphreys McGee, the banjo player from Mumford and Son, the keyboard player, and it was an eclectic group of all-star, top-notch musicians. I said, well, that sounds cool. He said, well, we're doing the after party at the Americana Music Fest. You want to come check it out? I said, hell yeah, I want to go check it out. I went to check it out. They were great, and it was the only show they ever did. It was the first time they ever played together. And so I said, well, what do you want to do with this? And so he sends me a record, and he goes, what did you think of the record? I said, it was okay. He said, I know. It wasn't great. It was good, but I didn't hear that smell like, oh, my God, such and such song was a smash. And he appreciated the fact that I just didn't give him lip service. I didn't go, oh, man, you're amazing, which is a lot of agent speak. When you're, oh, yeah, you're great, you're fantastic. I don't do that. I've been fairly successful kind of telling everybody exactly what I think. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, but, I'm 69. I'm not going to change. So I call up, and we're working on we're going to start a residency at the Basement East. They said they'd do it, and just give this guy a little. And my young guys, there's no data. They don't want to do it. I said, don't do anything. You don't have to do a thing. I'm taking care of this one. Don't worry about it. They do not exist. All I ask is when they play, show up and see it. They got a great logo. I said, what's going to happen is they're going to go be great, and all the agencies, other competitors are going to start calling and go, hey, Cowboy, no, we're with CAA. And I didn't really do a whole heck of a lot other than inspire and say, I'm there for you to help blow some doors down.
That is actually a crazy story. I moved to Nashville 8 years ago, didn't know a soul, and I just went to, my first night there, I went to Tin Roof to a writer's round, and the guy goes, hey, y'all, I wrote Colder Weather by Zac Brown Band. And he goes, and there's a secret fourth verse that I'm about to play for you guys that didn't make it. And I'm like, I'm going to stay here forever. Nashville's the town for me. So that's really cool. Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it, y'all. Give it up for John Huie.